Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Hi, this is Eric.
And this is Carl.
And welcome back to this Romulans Bearing Gifts. This is episode 55. And speaking of Romulans Bearing Gifts, man, we're really getting some action. Or not some action, but some use out of this LA 10 forward set.
I'm telling you. Is it the holodeck? Is it the real thing? Is it in the past? Is it in the present? We're hanging out an awful lot there.
Yeah, and I'll say more about it later. I mean, that particular set location. But the only reason I brought it up is because you can definitely spot some bottles of Romulan ale that look reminiscent of the bottle from Wrath of Khan. But it's all there. And there's many, many, many more references in that set. But I'm not going to get into that right now. Yeah, we are back. It's just me and Carl again, but it's all good. Everyone's got a busy life, busy schedule. So we're pulling in whoever we can get. And we are back finally with episode 4. I just got to say, inside baseball for the listener, at current time, we have already seen up to episode 6 of season 3. And the only reason I'm saying this is because sometimes it's too hard to pretend like we haven't seen the future episodes. And we're not going to drop spoilers for like episode 5 or 6. I mean, heavy spoilers. But I'm just letting you know that we have future knowledge in case something sounds weird. Because I just find it's sometimes too hard to pretend certain things. So I'm just putting that out there just so you know. And then also, Inside Baseball, it's been a while since we recorded episode 3 of season 3. So as I said on that episode, I think several weeks ago, oh man, these damn cliffhangers. Oh God. Like every episode, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, another cliffhanger, you know.
Same bat time, same bat channel. That's how they get us coming back. That's how they're going to get
us
coming back.
And if you remember at the end of episode 3, Vadic is using the portal weapon. Riker and Picard are having a lot of words with each other in front of the kids. Getting really contentious, and then
that was hard to watch. That was hard when the parents fight. That was hard to watch right there.
Yes, all the ensigns are just staring at each other. And then Picard's maneuver backfires at the very end of the episode. And so now the Titan is like drifting aimlessly like into this strange nebula. That was the cliffhanger. And I was like, God, man, these I mean, the show's great, but like, I like a little bit of resolution, you know, episodically, like Mandalorian or something like that.
Yeah,
you know, we can have a cliffhanger every now and then, but so it was rough waiting for episode 4. But finally, no win scenario. Where have we heard that before? No win scenario. Mm-hmm. What's gonna happen, or you know, how are we gonna resolve this? I had some ideas. I can't remember if I verbalized them on the last episode, but I had a feeling, because this nebula is so curious, that the key could be there. But Carl, man, let me hand it over to you. Any initial thoughts, or where do you want to go first?
Wow, so many places. Like I said, we're overwhelmed, honestly, with the quality of Picard this season, because faithful viewers will recall what we went through with Picard season 2. I mean, there was some genuine dread, doing a couple of episodes in season 2, and to see the difference in tone and focus and detail from what we had then to what we've got now. It is remarkable. It is remarkable, the difference. And if I recall, I believe I said something to the effect of, when season 3 of Picard was lined up, I recall saying something like, uh you know, season 3 is probably gonna be like really good, and I'm going to be very upset about that, because the main question is, well, what the hell have we been doing all this time? Where was this for the whole previous 2 years of Picard? I'm a little upset. Got to tell you, a little upset, because this is actually beyond what I expected the series of Picard
That's an understatement.
was going to be. No, I don't just mean, like, when I heard what Picard was conceptually and what it was going to be season 1, and I was, buckling up to prepare for what Picard was. What we are seeing here in season 3 is beyond what I expected Picard, any of these, to be. So, to be looking forward to these episodes, to really feel the joy of being back in this space again. It's just shocking, really. It is, when you it's just like, what we've been through, and now it's like, what in the hell have they been doing all of this time? This is all we were looking for to start with. So it's beautiful. It is beautiful, and I'm so excited that things have turned around. But yeah. So coming off of the cliffhanger and starting into this episode again, we start with the 5 years ago. All right, now.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you know how I feel about this. But all right, see, here's the thing. I have been concerned about the over emotionality that we have had in modern Trek. I've also been concerned about the non-sequential times storytelling that they love to do now. And I'm like, why? Why with all this jumping back and forth? But they make it work, don't they? In these recent episodes, I am sensitive to the time that we're all jumping around in time, but they actually make the exposition, why they do it, in a way that's got a little bit of relevance, that's not so heavy-handed. Still a little heavy-handed, you know how they roll, but it's not so heavy-handed that it's distracting and that it's hard to watch. They found a more reasonable balance for each and every one of those things that I kind of knew what they were trying to do before, but now they've got the balance right, and it's just shocking to see how much smoother it all is. So I'm gonna call it out every time. There are multiple times when it happens. It's starting with this episode, and I'm gonna call it out where we see what they would have done heavy-handed, what would have been sloppy, what would have been too emotional any other time. How are they pulling it off now with this season of Picard, and what makes it work now? Because it's been bothering. I'm like, how could it have changed so much? All right, so the truth is, we still got the Kurtzman emotionality in it. It's still actually there. It's not as heavy-handed as it was, and there's some other things that they balance it out. But all right, so let's start with the 5 years ago. You see what's going on. We're back in 10 forward. Picard's trying to eat his haddock, and then the kids come in and they start grilling him. Start asking him all these questions about, what was it like? What was it like, Admiral, when you were a ship and flying a ship around? Okay, no, so there's clearly an emotional setup and exposition that is going on with this tale. The stories that he's telling, why he's telling this story now, and of course the big hammer at the end, of this moment is all in line with the normal emotionality that we have seen with modern Kurtzman Trek. But there's one thing. First of all, we know and love these characters. It's one thing to take us on these emotional journeys with characters that we have known for 35 years, bringing up things that we all know and that we all care about, taking us back home with these things. It's one thing to bring that up with these guys because we know their history and we have that sentimental connection with them already. Contrast that with when they would try to do the same thing with brand new characters that we knew nothing about, and they try to cram it in like half an episode. We're supposed to be getting to know and are supposed to have the same emotional resonance with characters that we don't know. It makes a big difference when we are able to share in the emotional resonance with characters that we know and we have this connection with. It's again, if you see them doing the same thing with earlier Picard with a bunch of characters that we don't know, when they do with Discovery, folks we've never seen, one person pops up on the bridge and they try to take us on these long exposition tales in history. It's not interesting then. It works here because when Picard is telling stories, we live them with him. Right? He's talking about, and then we told stories with metaphor. We knew. Oh, we remember that, Picard. There is a strong, so if you're going to be pulling on the emotional, heartstrings, the fact that we actually have a connection to these characters gives it the gravity that it needs. Otherwise, it would have been too shallow, too heavy-handed, and too superficial, and it would have felt kind of clawing. So, first thing is, it still has the heavy emotionality of what Kurtzman's crew has been about with modern Star Trek. But the big difference is we know these guys, we know the story, and we have an emotional investment with them that they haven't been too heavy-handed in abusing through this particular season of Picard. So, that being said, all right, so we're back 5 years ago. We're seeing, the captain there in 10 forward, 10 forward, what were we going? 10 forward actual, because apparently we're going to have to reference them as we go throughout this. He's in 10 forward actual, and he's reminiscing about, his past. So again, there's an emotional resonance here that is not, pretending. It's not forced on us. Because we know these characters, we know these people, they've been a part of our lives for 35 some years, and so they have been respectful of that emotional connection, and they have been telling stories in a way that connects us with the stories that we all know and the things that we care about. So there's nothing wrong with having a strong emotional backbone to the stories, but if you don't have time to connect us to those characters, it feels artificial. The fortunate thing about this season of Picard is not only are they respectful of the past, the history that we have with these characters, but and the characters are acting like they actually, like the characters we know. There's a consistency among their behavior that makes us feel like we're returning to friends that we knew. They are also getting on with real storytelling, with not just the emotional side of this, but we got explosions, we got battles, we got phaser fire. So they have really done a great job of finding a balance between all of these things, including jumping back and forward in time with their exposition storytelling. So even to start the episode by going back in 5 years is not frustrating, because there is a real payoff to why they're doing this, and they frame the story that is to come nicely by going back and forth between past and forward and what's happening. So again, it's too easy to mess this up. And for them to have, again, I don't know if they're learning their lesson. I don't know if it's easier because we have this connection, but it's so much more balanced. It's so much more natural. It flows so much nicer. We took it back 5 years, framed what's coming in this episode. We see very, very proud Captain Picard talking to the all the ensigns and whatnot, beginning to tell the tale of his past journeys and how perhaps that is going to align with things that are going to happen in this episode.
Yeah, and in the scene, Picard starts off as if he just wants to be left alone, but then it doesn't take much prodding where all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, let me tell you what. And he just completely opens up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was interesting. An interesting little turn. Okay. Meanwhile, we have Seven out there doing her best impersonation of Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones, trying to solve a mystery, trying to figure out what's going on with our reveal of a changeling on board last episode. She wants to get to the bottom of this. She goes to the ensign's quarters, finds his human corpse in there. She actually goes over to Shaw, who's recovering from his injuries. Trying to get more information because she apparently isn't like the most knowledgeable about changelings. I guess because she missed the whole Dominion War and all that business. So Shaw is sharing some of his insights, and he talks about like Odo's pot.
You just steal a spot,
Right, which is okay. I mean, obviously, nice to get a little mention and see a little passport photo of Odo. I mean, that's fine, that's cool. But I wasn't sure if it made sense. Like, I mean, because obviously changelings need to go into their gooey form, to like recharge or whatever. But they don't have to have a metal pot that looks like Odo. Like, it was a unique pot, is what I'm saying, that Odo had.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense why another changeling would have something so similar.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and we're gonna let it go, because they made up for it in other ways. I agree, the pot was too much like Odo's, but we know that that's the history of the changeling, and we know that for some reason they're rather particular about their pots. So maybe
But I believe, I didn't actually research this myself, but his was like a specific gift given to him from like a Bajoran or something. So that, you know what I mean? It's very unique and specific.
I don't remember that. Okay, all right. Well,
It may not have been seen on screen, but I think Odo may have explained it at some point. I'm not sure. I didn't do the research, like I said myself. I'm just taking someone else's research. So it was a very unique, special gift, like a one of a kind of situation.
Okay, all right.
So it'd be weird if other changelings were like modeling their own receptacles after like a Odo heirloom.
That's true.
That's true. But anyway, fine. It's neither here nor there.
And you know what? I don't remember this history of it, but when you go and look at it again, it does look Bajoran. It really does. So you're probably onto something. Yeah. Okay. All right. I just want to throw this in also. Okay. Again, I'm just trying to understand how things have gotten so much better. When you watch, okay, so
I'll share something more with you at the end of this episode from the dark web, like some of the theories as to answer that question. But go ahead.
All right. Well, okay. So the scene where Seven is rummaging around the guy's, room trying to find the pot. Now, once I say it, you're gonna go back and you're gonna be like, "Holy crap!" But okay, so just roll with me on this. If you look at early episodes of Picard, and again, I've told you they're a little heavy-handed with things. One of the things that they're a little heavy-handed with is the camera shake. They are
yes
on the camera shake, and you see they have this habit of trying to get this urgency from the audience, or to say, "Oh, something is happening," by trying that real first person shaking the camera thing. They were nuts about it in the first two seasons. It was just it was too much the way they were doing it. It was exaggerated to the point where you notice that they are live shaking this camera around, trying to do, I don't know, documentary style or whatever.
Yes. It was cool back when like BSG Revival did it, and things like that. But that was a bygone era in cinematography. I mean,
we've had enough, right? We get a little of that goes a long way. The scene where Seven is looking for the pot, they get a little crazy with the camera, but it's not ridiculous. They managed to pull it back. The same thing would have been bananas in season 1 and 2. Here, when you go back and watch, you're gonna be like, damn, they are moving the camera a lot. But they hold it in. They contain it. So it wasn't until the second or third time that I watched, I was like, oh, there it is again. But just again, if you go back and watch it now, you're gonna be like, wow, they are getting a little crazy. But
I'm watching it now, and you're right. Everything you're saying about this particular scene, I agree with. And it's funny watching the scene again of Seven rummaging through the purse. Reminds me of Varys when she was looking for the boots.
Okay.
in Undiscovered Country. But what were you gonna say?
But I'm just saying that they managed to dial that back. Everything, there's just more balance. There's more balance.
You are correct, but let me just offer a little counterpoint because it's something I forgot to mention in the previous episode of the podcast. Because I didn't really see with the scene you just spoke about, I didn't really notice it because it didn't affect me as I was watching it.
As it should have.
But in the previous episode, there was a moment in the corridor where Riker was having like a little like what do you call it? Like an intimate conversation. I can't remember if it was with Beverly or Seven or Jack. Maybe it was Picard. But near the end of the previous episode, Riker was having this like intimate conversation in the hallway with someone. It was a calm moment. The camera kept like bobbing, like, and I was like, that's the first time I jumped out, and I was like, what is happening? This is like a quiet moment. Mm-hmm. Why is the cameraman like shaking? Why? Whoa! Like, I understand in frenetic moments, but not in still moments. And again, the cameraman had to literally be doing that, unless they somehow digitally do it in post.
They probably do it in post.
Handheld is fine when it's natural handheld.
Yep.
But this is the person willfully, like, not holding it steady, which is different.
They have done it better this season. Before, it was ridiculous. They are trying to tell an emotion or project an emotion with the motion of the camera. That's what they're trying to do. And, again, we need balance. We need this to be subtle. We are watching the show. You don't have to force it on us. So that's what they're trying to do with emotion. They're trying. It's always slightly askew when things are, not quite right. It shakes a lot when there's a lot of action that's happening. It's slow and thoughtful when they're having intimate conversations, normally, unlike yours. That's what they're trying to do by introducing this motion with the camera. But you got to be cool about it. And so, they have managed to dial it back.
Yeah, I agree with you overall. They've dialed it back. It's overall fine. But I want to say up through episode 6, there's been 3 instances. The one I just mentioned, and maybe like 2 other random instances with that. Again, I was like, whoa, just for a second took me out. So another thing I was lamenting in the previous 3 episodes was like, come on, I want to know who's behind this. I want to know who's behind this. Like, and we kind of got that with the reveal of the Changeling last week. But still, we get a little bit more when we go to Vadic on her ship, and she has to, like, I guess, check in with Homeworld or something. And a very curious scene because, I mean, we already kind of got this in the previous episode, but we doubled down in this episode that, yes, there's a lot of changelings, but it's different. It's different somehow. They're not that James Cameron like morphing goo. Like they're so much more organic looking.
The sirloin version.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is supposed to be as a result of their evolution, is why they're no longer pure translucent. Now, they've got new tricks to pull off what they're supposed to be doing, and therefore,
I'm curious. Was it just natural evolution? Was it an unintended consequence of the stuff that happened in DS9 and like the infection? Like, I'm not really sure. Or are they like another, like, are they like Remans versus Romulans, or Vulcans versus Romulans? Like, versus the original changelings. But even then, I'm still not sure. And then, so Vatic, she does this crazy thing where she cuts off her hand, and it like
Because apparently changelings can't use a communicator. They don't use communicators. You gotta, which begs the why did she have to slice if she's part changeling? Why did she have to slice her hand off? I don't know.
right. So I'm assuming it's just a changeling thing, and I guess if those are your ways, you would just do that even if you had a communicator. You would just you would do what you're used to. But it's still a weird process because yeah, it's basically like she's separating off some of her goo, and then it kind of like it's like if you're a changeling, you can take off a little section of yourself, and it's the equivalent of like the hologram communication in Star Wars, except
Yep.
it's through this goo medium. And
Yep.
then it sort of makes the face of like, I'm assuming like, well, it is like her leader or who she reports to. And it's a little Snoke-y. I don't mean visually Snoke. I mean conceptually, it's a little bit like Snoke. The effect is really weird. When I was just looking at it right now on screen, it kind of reminds me, if anyone's familiar, of Princess Mononoke, when the humongous boars get what I used to call sausages, but they get this weird goo that goes around their entire bodies, and it's just kind of like undulating and blah, and it kind of reminded me of that Studio Ghibli effect. But I'm still unclear though, like because the first time I watched it, I took it as she's using changeling communication, but is she actually talking to a changeling on the other end of the phone, so to speak? I mean, it seems like, yeah, that's the likely assumption, but my first instinct was, or is this a different kind of race? Like it made me think that almost like the changeling race um answers to someone else who may not be a changeling. And maybe this was the way it always was, we just never knew. Or maybe it wasn't like this. Maybe this, I don't know, am I crazy to think that there could be an outside entity that may be something else, like another type of alien we're unaware of?
I don't know. I mean, you're bringing in some good points. I don't know. All I can say is, whenever we had traditionally thought of changelings or saw them, they had that same plastic Odo look about them. I don't recall any flaming skulls or anything like that. So, if she's supposed to be talking to a changeling, they sure don't look like the ones that we knew. And I don't know if that's just their modern take on them or what. But maybe that's the case. Who knows? But we don't know at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, so because it seems obvious that she's communicating with a long distance changeling, but it seemed to me like, though, to put a twist on it, that it could be some other type of being or something who has either always led the changelings, and what I mean by lead, kind of like the relationship that what were the actual alien guys called the Dominion?
I think that was the set of them, because they had like the the lizard ones. We had the the Wayun's crew, and then
Oh, you're right. So the lizard ones, I don't know what their race is called.
yeah.
But just like they are sort of subservient to the changelings, it made me wonder if the changelings themselves are subservient to someone else higher.
All right, well, maybe I'm sure we're gonna find out. There's no evidence of that in this episode yet, though. So
Right. It's theory crafting.
yeah.
But I'm glad we're finding out more, because that has been bothering me to no end.
Well, come on, we got multiple episodes to get through. They're gonna gently unveil that as we go.
And now we learned some more stuff. We go back to the holodeck 10 forward, and we learn, and I feel like this is a Chekhov's gun situation potentially, because Jack is like, wow, we're in this situation where we have almost no power in the ship, but yet we can run the holodeck. And Picard explains how it runs like on a different battery system, and the purpose of it is so the crew can have some sort of sanctuary, in times of dire distress or whatever. And that's all fine and good. I get it, but I almost feel like this is setting something up for like a future episode. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. This detail of having this like extra or maybe it's just so they can explain these scenes in this one episode. But
I think I think they're setting the stage for something. They definitely wanted to clarify things in this episode because the danger of power, loss of power, is such an integral part of everything that happens. For them to be like, well, wait a minute, they got the lights on down there. I think they just took a moment to explain why that was the case.
okay, and there's another reason why I was a little bit bumped on it, and I don't know if I should get into it in this episode or wait till episode 6 to get into it retroactively. I haven't decided yet, but I'll figure that out. And now Shaw comes and joins them, and I don't know.
Yeah, you're talking about Picard and Son having their intimate moment in the holodeck.
Yes.
And then Shaw busts in. Yeah, that was.
Now he drops a little revelation,
Mhm.
but was this actually a surprise to you?
What that he?
The first time he met Picard.
Oh no, not to me. Not to me.
Yeah, because I want to say I mentioned it on one of the previous episodes. I don't know if it was with you or with Caleb, but I'm pretty sure I stated that the most obvious reason why Shaw seems to have like a chip on his shoulder towards Picard and company, it's probably Wolf 359.
Yeah.
And okay, fine. Okay. I mean, we can go to that well again. I mean, we did it with Cisco. I get it, but
that is a reasonable point of pain for him. Now, there are a couple of other questions conceptually that Starfleet knew that this dude had, let's just say, some psychological challenges. They thought it was a good idea to put a Borg first officer under this dude. I'm just right away you're starting to wonder, what's up, Federation? Come on.
Well, okay, that is true, but on the other hand, wouldn't there be like of people who are captain age, at this time, wouldn't many captains have that similar baggage because many of them would have been Wolf 359 veterans?
True.
So, it would kind of be the same situation whether Seven was on this ship or that ship. Yada yada. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, the question is, do all the captains react the way Shaw does?
Oh yeah, no. That's Shaw specific.
That's the problem, though. That is the problem. I know many captains might have had a difficult time at 359, right? Because clearly we saw Cisco
Although
with the similar reaction.
If I pretend like Shaw's like a real person, like if I go in universe, he kind of seems like the kind of person to me that he's really like under normal situations, he's really good at masking his inner self. And he seems like the kind of person that could somehow keep this off the radar of Starfleet psych ops or whatever.
All right, no,
you don't think so?
Nope. Because remember what our changeling pirate, what's her name? What she says when she first sees him, she's going through the stolen Starfleet archive information about the lead officers on the ship. She goes, "Hello, Captain or Admiral Jean-Luc Picard." And she's going through the history. And then she sees Riker there. And she goes through his history. And then she sees Shaw, and she says something to the effect of, good to see that Starfleet allowed you to return, or that, welcome back, and given your past, that you were, they allowed you to be captain again. She says something to the effect of, "You've been through some stuff." You remember that? You don't remember that?
I no, not now that you bring it up. But if you wouldn't have brought it up, no.
Okay, so with that being said, clearly that she stole the record. He's got a record, so they knew. So that history is established that Shaw has some sensitivities, and it does not. I don't think that this degree he would have been able to mask. Now, I think ordinarily, I'm kind of with you, because when we, what we've gotten to know Shaw, he has this sort of bipolarness where there's this extreme competence, and there's this focus, but then it kind of breaks down too. You would think that he could smooth that out. But on this issue, he's had some problems. So yeah, I don't think he got away.
You're right. You're perfectly right. Before I get to the next plot point, just something I wanted to mention. When Seven first goes to Shaw in his quarters in this episode, you see Shaw behind him has like 3 portal windows, and I get this is a unique nebula we're in, but it seems weird that the view out his quarters windows is just nothing except for a little bit of cascading light, but there's no stars, there's no substance. They just look like empty windows, and it reminds me of wasn't there like a specific TNG episode where they forgot to put in like the star background, in the observation
Did they?
observation
I
deck.
remember that one. Okay.
I feel like there was an episode where they forgot to put in even that. I know they used to do that effect with like the velvet with the pricks in it to make the little random star field. I feel like there's one episode where they just like left it completely empty, and it was like it was weirdly like that. I was like, I get there in a nebula, but would it literally be nothingness? Like, I mean, at least a cloud or something.
Yeah.
Like it was just nothing at all. It was weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, now of course you knew this was going to be something because early on in the episode, and let me say something else about Crusher. Going back to episode 2 or whatever it was, and we talked about it on the podcast where like, the Titan doctor, the resident doctor, was like giving Beverly the cold shoulder. You've been out and this, out of service, and you don't know about new things. At the time, we talked about it on the podcast. But after we recorded that, whenever we did, I completely forgot that in Beverly's backstory in the show, that she was literally like the chief doctor of Starfleet Medical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That makes it even more insane that even if you, as the resident doctor, believe what you believe, I think you would still bite your tongue a little if this person was who they are, like former head of Starfleet Medical.
Yeah.
Good grief. Anyway, I just thought that I discovered that after we recorded, and I was just like, oh my gosh, calm down.
We don't know what's up with that doctor because right out the gate she was causing problems. So I don't.
Like, yeah, Shaw was like, "Hey, you're my best bud, and we're in this together." I ain't hating on these old fogies. Anyway, so Beverly, you knew this was going to be something in this episode because just for funsies, she's already figured out like the schedule of when these like pulse energy waves are going to happen, and you knew that wasn't going to be nothing. I already suspected from the previous episode that, yeah, because I think they mentioned already that there was something biological about this nebula, and so I figured the solution to the problem of the sinking ship would be something with it. I mean, that's kind of obvious, which is fine. But Riker's kind of like, oh man, we're done. Like, he comes to Picard. He's like, yeah, we already made up already, but we're done. Like, he's over there recording like his last message to Deanna and everything, which he fails at. But Riker just thinks this really is a no-win scenario. I wonder how difficult it was for them to bite their tongues and not say Kobayashi Maru, because it has been oversaid, like in New Trek in the last 4 years. So yeah, good not to say it again, but I wonder how hard it was, considering this was another potential no-win scenario. But Riker is really down the dumps, but now Jack has something like a glimmer in his eye, somehow inspired by his biological father's story of stealing the shuttle back in the day. And Jack has this thing where like, no, we can do this. If we all work together, we're gonna figure this out. And we learn for the first time, I believe, in Star Trek lore that there's there's a function to those vent-looking things on nacelles. Not all nacelles have them, but iconically, the Motion Picture Enterprise certainly made that feature really popular. And so it turns out, these energy pulses. If we just open the vent, we may be able to channel the energy and kind of like ride the wave. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on all of this?
Well, I like the fun of tinkering on ships. I always liked Scotty as the engineer back on original series, and they have gotten away from the fun of tinkering on these ships. They've been running too smoothly. So to have them hot wiring it and poking around and blowing the panels off of it, I thought that was fun. I thought it was an interesting device, and I thought it built a lot of really fun tension. Beautiful seeing the ships this way. I mean, by the way, imagine that fans of Star Trek would like spaceships. Who could have imagined such a thing? We've been away for so long that finally, them giving back a little love to the ships, and to the science behind the spaceships
Oh, I mean,
is a wonderful one.
there's no question. That is by far one of my favorite things in general about season 3 versus 1 and 2 is that I never cared for Rios' ship. I mean, like the interior or the exterior or the sets or what any of it. I never really. It just looked like generic Farscape Firefly.
Exactly. I was about to say it looked like Farscape, peacekeeper vessel. Something. It even the black and red scheme. So, yep.
Yeah, it was just like it's not Star Trek. It's I don't know what it is. Generic modern sci-fi show. And that is definitely one of my favorite things about any iteration of classic Trek or modern classic Trek is just being in the ship, in the bridge, in the ready room, in the hallways, in engineering, whatever. It's like how I feel about the TARDIS in Doctor Who. Like I love when we're in the TARDIS and we're just having a conversation, and I generally don't like the episodes where there's like no TARDIS at all. Generally, and that's how I feel about Star Trek, and to have just so much of it in these 4 episodes, like yeah.
It's wonderful because we know the advancements in special effects make it easier to do this kind of stuff, and so if it makes it easier to do this, you're wondering where the hell has it been? I mean, it's this is such an important part of Star Trek. To have ignored it for so long is quite ridiculous. They've got a couple of moments where Enterprise variants will get a glamour shot or two, but to get under the hood, to tinker around with the ships, to explore the physics of the escape. This is wonderful. This is what Star Trek is supposed to be about, and to be away from this for so long, and then to finally come back in a major way. It's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I would enjoy the tension of the vent scene. I enjoyed seeing all the panels hanging all off and then poking around with stuff under there. I enjoyed the conceptual surfing of the energy wave. We've seen them do that before on Star Trek, but it's just good to get back to it. So the tension of the physics and technology and the ship was very fun to see. It was enjoyable, and it made sense. It made sense. It didn't just feel tacked on. Yeah. So yeah, it's great.
Just a couple more things, and we'll kind of like close this one out. But it's fine. It was kind of obvious, I think. We still had the changeling running around, and Seven had already asked Shaw, like, how could you identify it? And you won't know things. Yeah, obviously. And so I don't think anybody fell for the subterfuge of LaForge Jr. Just checking in, like, okay, that was the most obvious thing ever, but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. And then of course the big, I guess, happy moment was that and they already kind of mentioned it before the very end, but this nebula is actually a biological creature that is going through basically I can't remember.
A birth. It's a birth.
Yeah, it's a birth. Yeah, it's a birth, but these are like convulsions, and then we get the little like happy little space babies. I think Jack
Yeah.
called them, and of course, and it was mentioned in the episode. I'll call back a little bit to Encounter Farpoint. I for some reason wanted them to mention that other episode. I can't remember what it's called, but the one where the actual space baby is born. I think the Enterprise didn't it give it like a cesarean, like the mother's cesarean or something,
Yeah. That's the one where we first see.
and then it attached onto the Enterprise.
Yeah. No. This is definitely supposed to be a tip of the hat to Farpoint because
Yeah.
they had the jellyfish ships. I mean, jellyfish aliens. So
Yeah, well,
again,
they could have made him to make it more Farpoint. They could have made him look even more like the original jellyfish.
um, perhaps not. You remember what the effect?
No, I don't mean like janky. I mean just kind of like resemble them, not.
These are the baby ones. We got it. It's
Oh no! But if you want to get pedantic, I don't think this is meant to be the exact same species. I think this is just meant to be like a similar species. And so what I'm saying is, if you really want to take it home, like that, this is the same species, then a little bit more because these space babies looked a little more like James Cameron's Aliens in the Abyss. Hope I didn't spoil that for anyone. Kind of like that kind of look more these space babies had. But yeah, and then just for the stinger, so thank goodness, this episode was kind of like a resolution for the first 4 episodes. It was like we had like a 4-episode arc basically within the season, and I was happy to have obviously much more of a closure type ending to the episode. And one other mention before I get to my final mention. This episode was completely devoid of Worf and somebody else.
Yeah, no Rafi.
And I was here for it. I mean, I don't always want to make it sound like I'm bashing that character, but I didn't need that distraction, at least in this particular episode. I didn't, because I was so, it would take away, just like it did in the previous 2 episodes, it would take away from the emotion, the drama of the moment, if we would be cutting away to them still. And so I was happy to have no cutaways, at least for this one episode.
Yeah, there was a lot happening in this episode, and the timing needed to be just right between going back and forth between 5-year-old, 5 years back, 10 forward actual, and what was going on in 10 forward holodeck, and what was going on in the danger of the ship. That's a lot of jumping around, and then for them to try to put Worf and Rafi in,
that would have been
that would have messed with the rhythm altogether.
Yeah. So kudos for that. And then while we do get closure in this 4-episode arc, we do get this weird little stinger ending with Jack looking in the mirror and seeing the upside down on his back wall, or some kind of red tendrils or something. And that's fine. I can deal with that rather than a full on cliffhanger. And that's it.
Okay. Well, hang on. A couple of other things I wanted to point out.
Go ahead.
So again, remember, I'm focusing on the difference between how they execute things in this versus how they have executed in some of the other seasons. You are right. This is a closure over a 4-story arc that we have seen before, but it's in a lot of different ways that are subtle, and I think it's important to point them out. The first thing is, when all of this adventure starts, Riker is a broken man. He's broken because of pain from the loss of his son. And that caused a rift between he and Deanna. And so, he's kind of limping into this adventure just for something to do because, he's had some problems at home. As a result of what he learned and from what he experienced, running around with Picard and, near-death experience and all of this, he has found some closure, some healing that brings him back home. He's anxious to talk to Deanna again, and there is change and evolution and healing in Riker. Picard, if we look at him in this episode, or in this, series of episodes, starts out, he's regular old Picard. He's looking for retirement. My adventure of life is over for me. I am ready to settle down and retire. None of all this. Finds himself out in the Gamma Quadrant, or wherever the heck we are. All of a sudden, he finds out he has a son. All of this stuff gets him reevaluating his life. It once again, we get an opportunity where Picard gets to sample a life that perhaps was not his original path. One of the interesting things about the evolution of Jean-Luc Picard and the TV series, and now with the modern version of it, is, if you remember the first 2-3 seasons of Next Gen, Picard was a pain in the ass. He was not a likable captain. He was stiff. He was arrogant. Remember how he used to treat Wesley? I mean, he was really, really not, a nice, comfortable guy to be around. But over the series, he sort of grew and he evolved and he changed to the lovable, more balanced Picard that we now know. If we look at what's going on here, even the beginning of Picard, the beginning of this season of the original first season of Picard, there was a big uproar because people were happy to see Picard again, but they were really upset with the fact that episode 1, he was tremendously humbled, right? Because of all the stuff that had happened with the whatever we call them, the android war or whatever, combined with the Romulans. They had knocked Picard down in a way that was supposed to be humbling for him, but a lot of people took issue with it because they were like, well, this is a captain we know and love, and look at what they've done to him. They had a real big problem with that. All right. The fact that Picard has been humbled in that sense was a problem for a lot of people. It was a natural growth, it was natural evolution, and I think, once again, they were a little heavy-handed with how they were doing it, but people took issue with that. With this episode, look at what's happening. In 10 Forward, he's sitting here and he's talking to the ensigns and whatnot that are in there. He has always wondered what an actual family would have been like, what that path in his life would have been like. And at this moment, 5 years ago, when he's reliving all of his experience and whatnot, he is devoted to Starfleet. He's devoted to his history of Starfleet. He's always been a captain or admiral, and all that Starfleet's been his whole life. And then we see that moment where Jack, who was curious about his father, finally reached out to get to know who he was. And you see the symmetry and the balance of what is going on, right? Remember, Beverly's like, well, I told him who you were, and he chose not to see anything. Well, now we see that he actually did approach, but he went to check in on him. The other subtle thing is, remember when Picard brings Jack into the hologram, into the holographic version of 10 Forward. When they're walking in, Picard turns to him. He goes, "This place has a great deal of significance to me. Have you ever?" And Jack goes, "No, never." Now we're assuming the question is, have you ever been here, or have you ever seen this? Jack's lying to him when he says that. So there's this interesting. But anyway, so here we go. Jack is not coming clean with Picard about what was going on. But all right, so here we go. Picard has lived Starfleet. Starfleet has been his life. And then we see this moment where turns out Jack actually did, I don't want to say reach out, but at least he was in the presence of Picard and he was trying to gauge how he felt about things. And once again, that arrogant Picard leaks out, oh, Starfleet is all I've ever needed. And everybody's, oh, yes, they're applauding. And, that's the perfect thing for him to say. But at what cost? We see Jack is gone. Jack is gone. And at the end of this episode, when he survives the chaos and all the trouble that had occurred with his Starfleet crew, it reinforces his importance of family. And he looks over and he sees his son, and then he remembers that moment had occurred. So again, the symmetry and the balance of the evolution of Picard, showing him, what Starfleet was, showing what Starfleet took from him, showing where he can go in the future from that, yet another symmetry. But there's one more. Jack has always been singular, has always been by himself, has always been independent, minding his own business. And that one time he tried to reach out, you see Picard kind of smacked him down. So he has lived this life of relative isolation. And you see through that dialogue he has with Picard in 10 Forward that, he's not all tied up in all of this emotionality. He's not all tied up in this family stuff. I'm not going to join Starfleet. What's all that about? In the moment when they just survive this situation, and everybody pulls together as a crew. First time Jack sees the strong emotional bond of what it means to be a coherent crew, what it means for everybody to someone other than your family to feel like family in a moment and share that moment together. Remember, the people are hugging each other on the bridge. They just managed to make it out. They threw a rocket, at the crew. Everybody's banding together. And for the first time, Jack understands the connection of not just family, but the powerful connection of what the Starfleet ship family can mean. And so for the first time, this guy who's always been singular and by himself and minding his own business and been this stuff, finally gets to see what family is like. He sees Riker and Picard. He sees the crew embracing each other. He's there with his dad on the bridge. And all of that comes together in a powerful way for Jack too. I'm just pulling this out to say they have been trying to force emotionality through so many of these different series, through so many different episodes, and it's been ham-handed, it's been forced, it's been in a way that's so blatant that it takes something away. That they were finally able to leverage the history of the characters that we knew, a real emotional story of evolution between Picard, Riker, and Jack, for them not to be so heavy-handed that it took away from everything else exciting that was happening in this episode. This is finally the balance that I'm talking about. This is how you do the good storytelling. And I just wanted to call it, like I said, it's not that I'm against emotionality or that I don't want there to be power, that I don't believe emotion is important in these stories. It's just that they had been doing it in a way that was just out of balance. It just felt too in your face. It felt too forced. And now look at the emotional impact that we've had across characters that we did not know, Jack, characters that we've known all along, Riker and Picard, plus they embedded it in an action story. This is how you do it. It is remarkable that they were able to get this kind of balance together and finally tell the kind of stories that I guess they've been trying to tell all along. So I'm giving them props. It was really an amazing triangulation of action, emotion, history, and new characters. What we feel for Jack and Shaw after these first couple of episodes, way more than anything we felt over, some of the other more modern characters in the previous seasons of Picard. They're finally getting it right. And it's remarkable that they can do it so well now. So just wanted to give them kudos. Just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. No, I agree. It's a wonderful thing. And just because this episode's going long, maybe I'll speak to this a little bit more at the top of the next episode on the podcast. But no, well said. Well said. Any other final thoughts that you have about this particular episode?
That was it. That was just tying it up with an emotional bow.
Just because I like to rate things, even though it's kind of difficult when you have serialized storytelling. But if possible, how many changeling pots out of 5 would you give this singular episode?
This one, I'm going to give it a 4.5. 4.5. Like I said, it managed to balance so many things well. It was fun. This was a fun ride, so I'm giving it 4.5.
Yeah. As usual, of course, I agree with everything you said throughout the entire podcast. That being said, I'll give it a nice 4. 4. Everything was great. Everything was great. It's just, this isn't one of those episodes where, I'm calling all my friends and telling them to watch it. So that's why I'm not really going to go higher than a 4 at this time. But it was perfectly nice, perfectly competent. Glad to see like an end of an arc. To just have a little bit of rest, so I'm not pining super hard for next week's episode. But yeah. Um, Before we say goodbye, uh, another little weird Easter egg sort of thing from last week's episode that I forgot to bring up. Do you remember in last week's episode there was a changeling that Raffi and Worf sort of like kidnapped, and then they were like torturing him?
Sure, yeah.
The actor who played that changeling, do you know where we've seen him before in Star Trek?
No.
And obviously I didn't discover this on my own. I'm not that good, obviously. The work of others. But that actor is actually the same actor who played Picard's son in the Nexus in Star Trek Generations.
What? Really?
If you remember the
Yeah.
Christmas scene, and he had a little like blonde haired little son. If you look at a screenshot of his face, like side by side, you'll see it. You'll see the resemblance. But yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. They go back. They go back. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those little things, and I forgot to mention it last time.
Nice.
But yeah, woo! We got plenty more to talk about. The episodes are coming. Yeah, just stay tuned. Next week we should be doing episode 5 of Picard season 3. But till then, this is Eric.
And this is Carl. And until next time,
10 fucking grueling hours.
Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
I was going to bring that up, but
that's a major milestone in Trek, apparently. Yes.
I mean, they've cussed previously in New Trek, but not from
that one.
Not from his
Not
mouth.
the F-bomb. Not the F-bomb. Yeah.
I was like, I had to go back and put the captions on, and I was like, did he just say what I thought he said?
So it was called Eliza back in the day. It was a very popular program, but just use these very simple tricks. They would take what you said and then would spin it around. And you said, well, why would you say what you just said? It would make you think that you were having a conversation with the computer. They were just doing a retrospective going, since GPT is becoming so popular, here's a review of where it's come from. And this is what it was like back in the 1960s. So I had never seen the old video footage of it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow.
It's funny, like as you were just explaining Eliza, what it brought up in my mind. It reminds me of when I was like learning Spanish at work, like day in, day out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always trying to go a little bit further, like in my communication skills and whatever. And a lot of times, a lot of my random conversations with random clients was me doing tricks, like doing verbal tricks to make them think we were having a full conversation. Really, we weren't, because I wasn't, comprehending everything that they were saying. So I actually learned a lot of tricks myself. Where one of my favorite that I bring up all the time, especially when I used to be teaching people in training, I'm just a beginner. I don't fully get, I'm like at a 3-4-year-old level of Spanish comprehension. And sometimes like someone would come up to me having some kind of like really pressing issue. Like, oh, oficial, da, 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 da. And when they speak really fast like that, then I really struggle, right, to understand. Yeah. So if they just like are just blurting out all this stuff and they've completely lost me. Like, I don't want to say, "Hey, stop, hold on, go back." No. I just let them like vent. And then what I would do is, because I already lost the comprehension, but I would still pretend like I would be like furrow my brow, like I'm concentrating. I'd be like nodding my head and go, yeah, and then they would tell me their whole thing, and then just be like da 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 da, and then just be looking at me like, okay, there it is. What do you have to say about that? And so I did this a million times. It never failed. I would just like sit there like I was still thinking, contemplating, and I would go, tal vez, and I would say tal vez like a question. Tal vez is the Spanish word for maybe. And they would always go, oh yeah, da, 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 okay, da, da. And then just like, what? I did that so many times. It never, ever failed.
All right, wait. I'm just trying to understand. So, after they told you the story, what do you think? What do you think? And your answer would be maybe.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
That's funny.
It worked every time, and they would just go, "Oh, okay, da, 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 okay, da, da, da," and then just walk off. Oh man, I'm telling you, it is such a life hack. Like
that's the kind of stuff Eliza used to pull.